It's time for the Daily Stand Up Podcast presented by AgileDad with your host, Lee Henson. Without any further ado, let's get started. UX has been a hot topic lately in my email box. I've seen a lot about leveraging AI for UX and understanding UX, and something fairly recent came out referred to as the UX Research Methods Map. Now, I found this really interesting because I did find a few articles about this online, and I kind of read through those and I put together some thoughts. So I want to go ahead and share with you what I've learned and get your thoughts as well. So I definitely want to hear your feedback, your comments on this, because once again, it's a topic that I've just seen around a lot, and I want to make sure that I'm delivering the right message regarding this. So if you think about, if we go back in time, thousands of years, right, when you're talking about hunting and gathering society, you're a hunter hoping to get lunch for the day, and you built a tool to help. There are three usability outcomes we can expect: that you're going to get lunch, or that you didn't get lunch, or that lunch got you. That's the worst case scenario. So, if you know and expect these outcomes because the inventor, maker, and user of the tool were all the same person, it made sense. It all flowed together. But fast forward thousands of years later, and that's no longer true. We, the people who build the products and services, have put distance between the inventor, the maker, and the user. Simply put, distance, the bigger the bigger the risk, right? So that makes sense. Bigger distance, bigger risk. Just all adds up. Risk that people don't want, like, use, trust, or derive value from our product. That's huge. When we make product decisions, we can't always be intuitive that they're the perfect decision for our end user. Our prehistoric ancestors were a lot more fortunate that way. They knew that bringing food home was the only option. So if you call, it brings to mind a classic catchphrase. If you've ever used human-centered design before, we're often not the end user of the product or services we create. To reduce that risk, those same practitioners, or any good UX researcher, will tell you to get as close as possible as you can to your end users. This is where it gets really interesting. In Scrum specifically, they call out product owners and say that product owners have the responsibility of doing all these things. Well, the truth is, a lot of times the product owner is so busy that they don't have the bandwidth to do these things. So then they lean in on someone else to do it, and sometimes the person that they lean in on may or may not be the right person. There's just a lot of ambiguity into what we learn, and then it also becomes a form of the telephone game, where this person told this person told this person that this person said this, and by the time it gets to you, it's third or fourth down the line, which we all know what happens in that game, right? So there's a rub. Even when we get close to our end user, we still don't eliminate all risk. We can perfectly predict how all users are going to behave all the time. No, you can't do that, right? There's no way you can predict what every single user is going to do all the time. Moreover, we don't have endless time or money to spend on endless testing, and our users have limited time to spend with us to give us information. So we have to get really good at reducing as much risk as possible in as little time possible with as little energy spent by the end user as possible. And we need to create an environment that people feel comfortable, that they understand, and they understand that some risk is inherent, but they're comfortable with that level of risk, and that the experiences or outcome are going to far outweigh the risk. And that's where we need to be. So this is not a conundrum that's specific to a few individuals. There's so many companies that feel like dealing with risk is a good hedge game against, a future default, right? But what ends up happening is, no matter how educated or scrappy your developers are, customers' needs change. Things change with our consumers, whether it's internal consumers, external consumers. Things change. And if we're not pivoting and making those changes with them, we are going to be in trouble. So I think part of it is we need to explore questions within research models or methods. And we might use qualitative methods like in depth interviews, or quantitative methods like surveys. Preferably, we use a few of both and layer the insights from them together. But it's important to make sure you pick the right research method for the right questions you're exploring. So one of the things that I do in my Scrum classes, specifically the Scrum Product Owner class, is I talk about the opportunity to create a hypothesis, and I discuss the difference between an assumption and a hypothesis, and I point out that they're both assumptions are based on the way someone feels, hypothesis based on gathering information, processing information, and doing research. And I think that once you gain that level of understanding, it makes the rest of that decision making piece fall into place. Because if you created a UX research methods map, which is good, it allows the teams to explore the questions and create or generate assumptions and hypotheses. At its core, it's a decision tree, and it helps us consider the decisions we're trying to make, the types of questions we're asking. So it's almost as if you're going through the process of discovery where you're creating a persona, writing an elevator pitch around what that persona is trying to do, and then using that elevator pitch and leveraging it to make sure that you've got all your targeted audiences. Then you can take your work and you can put them into batches that make sense. You can affinity cluster your work. Then once you have your work affinity clustered, then it becomes easy for you to go back and circle around and say, okay, let's do some mapping, whether that's systems mapping, architectural mapping, ecosystem mapping. It could even be journey mapping, story mapping, empathy mapping. There's a lot here that we can do to make sure we have the right connection with our customer. And then layer by layer, as you apply these different mappings, you'll see how things flow, not just from your own perspective, but from the customer journey perspective, which is where we really need to see it happen and pressure test how well it's going to hold up. Because sometimes we find that when we get requests for things, especially from end users, that sometimes they were in an emotional state. And the things they asked for that were a dire emergency, when they were asked for, now all of a sudden may not be an emergency. So I think it's important for us to have those connections and communications to understand what factors are important to members in certain areas when searching for a new provider, for example, right? You have to be able to understand things, but the first thing you have to understand is none of these ways of doing things are perfect, right? There are always going to be exceptions to even the best study and research that you do. So this is definitely a good start, and it's definitely an important place for you to be. I think it's just important also to recognize that you are not setting out to change the way the customer behaves. And I know that sounds interesting. I mean, there are some cases where we're trying to adjust or pivot so that the customer can embrace a new product or service. But overwhelmingly, our goal isn't to change them. Our goal is to change us so that as the customer's wants and needs change, we pivot and evolve with the customer. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily take to heart. So we need to make decisions that shape how we're engaging with human-centered design, how we understand our end users, and the methods map is a good way to do it. So methods mapping, just in a nutshell, incorporates most of discovery and a couple of pieces from initiation. So if you ever saw the Agile landscape, it breaks things into 4 quadrants. It calls it initiation or ideation, discovery or seeking an MVP, delivery, which is the build out, that's the huge piece, and then release. If you're looking at that map, this covers all discovery and a small part of ideation. So this spans the first 2. Now, the value here is that most organizations struggle with the first 2 the most. So this is a good tool to help you make sure that you are asking the right questions and help you make sure that you got the right follow-up so that you can make sure you're focused on outcome and not output and delivering high value with as little output as possible. That's going to do it for this episode. I hope that you took something of value away. If you have a topic you want us to discuss, learn more at AgileDad.com. We would love to hear from you. As always, we encourage you to stay healthy, stay well, and stay agile, my friends. Until next time, do take care.